same tired storylines over and over again. If people never came up with new storylines, it was always, the same thing happening to the same kinds of characters, and you'd get bored. But there's a lot of different, very unique stories out there. Any other ideas on what authors do to make stories interesting?
Actually, they put a conflict in it.
They put a conflict in it. Very good. So from our realization that we need a conflict or an obstacle to make our characters have a struggle of some kind, that helps make our writing interesting. And also the fact that we need details, we need to show our readers what's going on, why choices are difficult, all of that, then we know that we can create a more interesting narrative. Another thing that we can do is figure out how to map out our personal narrative to make it more interesting. So what I mean by that is, if you've ever read a story, then you know that it probably isn't very interesting for it to just start sort of in the middle of the beginning. Imagine if a story just took something and it was just starting with a basic explanation of who everybody was, like blank lived in this city and they really like to eat chocolate, and so not many stories start with just a really boring explanation of who everybody is. A lot of stories will start with something a little bit more interesting and exciting, or at least something to grab your interest, and many essays or other kinds of writing as well. So today we're going to focus on mapping your personal narrative or outlining it. And so the first thing to start with is your conflict or obstacle. That's the topic of your personal narrative. So I want to make sure you all have your topics written down in one sentence, right? Okay, great. And so since you already have your topic, then now all that you need to do is just elaborate on your topic, add details. So answer questions like, where did it take place? So yesterday with your writing about the setting, when you answered that question, where did it take place? What about when did it take place? What did it look like? Who was there? How did you feel? Why did you feel this way? So it's really essentially the W's and your senses. What did it look like? What did it feel like? And another one to add might be, what did it sound like? So add details and elaborate. First, you want to answer the question where. So yesterday you were sharing some of your settings, and also one important thing to make sure that you have is maybe sharing with the reader how old you were then, or when it was. Was it 3 weeks ago, or was it 3 years ago? Because that's important to know. So ask yourself, where did your narrative take place, if you don't already have that. And then you would continue on. For instance, if my conflict is getting in trouble with my mom, and the specific instance was getting in trouble for making a huge mess, then my topic would be, I got in trouble for making a huge mess in my mom's pristine kitchen. And then ask yourself when. So I would say, okay, I was about 8, so then I would go further and I would say, when I was 8, I got in trouble for making a mess in my mom's pristine kitchen. So what I want you to do right now, quickly, this should probably only take about a minute or two, is write down your topic idea and include details such as where and when the conflict took place. For example, the summer I was 10, we went to Yellowstone National Park and I got lost in the woods. Now, you probably have already written your something similar with your paragraph explaining your setting, but I want you to just write quickly a topic sentence that says where and when your conflict took place. So for instance, the summer I was 10, we went to Yellowstone National Park and I got lost in the woods. Or when I was 8, I made a mess in my mom's kitchen and a huge argument ensued. And just raise your hand when it's done. Okay, I see raised hand. Anyone else finished? Raise your hand once you're done. Okay. Great. Perfect. So now we can move along. Now the reason I had you write this down is because we're going to practice with structuring the events that build up to that, or the reasons behind it, basically. So for instance, the summer I was 10, we went to Yellowstone National Park and I got lost in the woods. I might take that and I would make a list of what happened to lead up to that conflict or obstacle. So let me show you this. I put my events in order. So we drove to the park, we set up camp by a stream, I went for a walk, I heard a scary noise, so I ran. I realized I was lost, I wandered in the woods, I ran out of water, I got really scared, I tried to find my way back, I found a stream, I followed the stream back to camp. So you see how it sort of builds up. It's pretty flat at the beginning. It's just driving to the park, setting up camp by a stream. Then going for a walk really starts it going, and it gets more exciting from there. And then it starts going down once I find my way back to camp. So this didn't actually happen. I'm just using it as an example. I have been to Yellowstone Park, but I've never gotten lost. But putting your events in order like this helps you think, well, where do I want to start it? At the beginning, how do I draw my readers in? And you might think, well, what's the most exciting point in here? Maybe realizing that I was lost, and then I could start the narrative there. So the activity is to make a list. Write down what happened to lead up to your conflict or obstacle. So why did you get in a huge argument with your brother or sister? Or why did your mom start shouting at you? Or why were you having a difficult time deciding whether or not to try out for the baseball team? So write down all the things before that led up to your conflict or obstacle, and then how it was resolved. So you stopped arguing, or you tried out for the baseball team, or whatever happened. And so, number one, write down what happened to lead up to it, write down what the conflict or obstacle is, and then write down what happened afterwards in a list, sort of like this. And just raise your hand once you're done. Okay, is anyone finished? Great. All right then. Raise your hand if you'd like to share your list.
I went to my grandmother's house. I was eating grape juice. I spilled the grape juice on the floor. I was going to get in trouble.
Okay. Great. So what happened? Now, what happened as a result of the conflict? So like this one, take a look at. I realized I was lost. So the person is lost, and that's sort of their conflict. They're lost in the middle of the woods. Now, then it also shows, what happened. They wandered around, they ran out of water, got really scared, tried to find their way back down a stream, followed the stream back to camp. So it sort of resolves it. You also want to write what happened after you got in trouble. Good.
My mom promised I could go to Lincoln Park. She had to go to work right before it started. I called her. She said no to stop calling her.
Okay.
I started crying and locked myself in the bathroom and slept in the tub.
Okay. So you're giving me a very funny mental image there. I can't imagine anyone sleeping in the tub. So then, what happened after? Did your mom come home? Did you get to go? Nothing happened?
I didn't get to go.
Okay, you didn't get to go. So yes, definitely write down what happens afterwards. So I guess your conflict would be that you really wanted to go, you couldn't go because your mom couldn't take you. So very good mental image you create there. Okay, who else would like to share a list?
I was in my kitchen and
It was about 6:30 in the winter. My mom had to work for a long time, and I wanted to make a special surprise for her. Though I wasn't sure she completely liked it, I swear it was the only thing I knew how to make, was to apple pie. My dog came in and tricked me, and I got whipped cream all over the kitchen. And there were no cows because they were all the recipes and dried. When my mother came home, I didn't look happy to see her. Neither did she. But yet, still had to get up to the kitchen. Still had a long call. All turned out.
Okay, yes, I remember you read your reading, that was very nice. So I think that since they're pretty long, then we'll wrap up out with the list there. But the nice thing about putting your events in order, and the reason I'm having you do this is so that you can decide, well, what's the most exciting point? What's the really interesting, exciting point? So it might be when your conflict begins, like realizing that you're lost, or it might even be when you run out of water and you're realizing, oh no, if I don't get out of here, I'm in danger or something. So you want to look at this and you might want to start your narrative at a really exciting part, or you could start it at the chronological beginning. Does anyone know what chronological means?
Chronological means like it happens first, second, third, fourth, so on.
Exactly, it's first, second, third, fourth. So if you decide to put your story in a chronological order, that means that you're taking what you have on your list and you're telling the story exactly number 1, number 2, number 3 in that order. So we're going to be talking about chronological versus choosing the most exciting point, and they're both equally valid choices. But you can choose to start your story at the chronological beginning, so arranging them in the order that they actually occurred, as in number 1, I ate beans for lunch. Number 2, I farted in class. Number 3, everyone laughed at me. That would be a slightly, probably not something you want to write about for your personal narrative. But when you look at down your page and you see 1, 2, 3, then that would be chronological order. So an example of telling my story in chronological order. So using the Yellowstone example. The summer I was 10, the whole family piled into the car and we drove to Yellowstone National Park. It was a long, cramped trip, and we set up our camp. And we were relieved to climb out of the Suburban and set up our camp on the banks of a sparkling stream. So this would be starting directly with going to Yellowstone. So what do you think would be one benefit of telling your story in chronological order?
What would be the benefit of telling in chronological order?
It'll be more interesting.
You think it might be more interesting? It is possible that it would be more interesting if it was in chronological order. It really depends on how you write it. Because if you write it like first I did this, second I did this, third I did this, if you kind of list it off, then it might not be so interesting. But if you make it really exciting and you weave everything together, it might be very interesting. What do you guys think? What's another benefit of chronological order?
Rebecca? It would make sense.
It would make sense. Yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry.
I think it would make sense because if you had, like, it wouldn't make sense if you did not tell in order, if you did. It's like it wouldn't make sense if you didn't tell in order.
Okay, so it might make sense to your reader if you explain in chronological order what happened, because we're used to life going on like 1, 2, 3, continuing on like that. So it might make sense to the reader. Now, what do you guys think might be a con or a not so great thing about telling your story in chronological order?
Yeah.
When you put what order? You put first and third, the first, second, put.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
I can't put it in order.
Somebody else want to try? Jacoby.
First, then, next.
So why would that be a bad idea though?
After that, it's not necessarily a bad idea. It's just that
Okay, so it seems like a lot of people think that there's some benefits and there are some cons. You know, there's always pros and cons to everything. And the reason I ask you is because I want you to start thinking about, do I want to tell my story in chronological order, or do I want to tell it out of chronological order? Because that'll influence how you begin and how you continue along. But they both have benefits and downsides. So when you start your story in chronological order, then you start with the first thing on your list, and I want to practice, even if you're not planning on writing your narrative in chronological order. Using your list of events as a guideline, begin writing it in chronological order. So look at what's the number one thing on your list. Number one thing on your list, number two, number three, and just write up to number three, I think, and then raise your hand once you're done. So begin writing your story in chronological order. So okay, I saw 2 raised hands there. Is anyone else finished?
What you said?
Raise your hand when you're finished.
Do something.
Begin writing your story using your first 3 events.
Oh, I thought we wrote it in the
Well, yes, you have. Yeah, yesterday you did practice writing the beginning of your story to try setting, and today we're practicing organizing it in different ways. So you're going to practice writing it in chronological order, just to see what that looks like, and to decide which one you prefer. Okay, would anyone like to share what they have so far?
No.
Then went to the toy section, and a man found them.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
We went to Walmart, went to the toy section, and a man found them.
Okay, so, did you write up to number 3 from your list? Okay, great. So one thing I would recommend for the beginning is to make it, like for instance from this one, the summer I was 10, the whole family piled in the car and we drove to Yellowstone National Park. You don't have to necessarily put it like right at the first sentence, but you might want to explain quickly when that was. So was it recent? Was it a long time ago? But otherwise, pretty good job on your first sentence. I know that it's a little weird writing it in chronological order versus what we did yesterday. So great job on that. Thanks for sharing. Okay, who else would like to share their first sentences?
Jacob.
Okay.
Loud, Jacob.
One day, 2 years ago, we drove to Disney World and we had to check into our hotel. After we checked into our hotel, next we got on a bus to go to Anaheim.
Okay, so good job with you're very clear on where this is. You're driving to Disney World, you're checking into the hotel. One thing I would warn you against though, doing too much is you're saying a lot of then, next, and one thing that you don't want to do too much, even though you're writing chronologically, you don't want to use too much of first, then next, because the reader starts to get this sort of feeling like that it's like a list, that you're listing off what happened. So when you write it, then you want to sort of weave it together and avoid using too many of those words. Okay, let's get one more person.
Okay, okay. Me and my grandma walked in the house and exhausted, ready to eat dinner. Before I got to the top, it smelled something stinky. I walked to the stove and saw my grandma left the stove.
Okay, so your grandma left the stove on, and I'm sure some exciting things follow. So you guys have done a pretty good job of writing chronologically, and one thing that I would ask you to do though is to try to make your chronological beginning just as exciting as your yesterday's beginning when you were sharing the setting and you were kind of starting in the middle of the action. And it is possible to do that. However, if you want to try to make your writing more exciting from the very beginning, then you can also choose to jump right into the action and then backtrack to explain how you got there. So for instance, a lot of you yesterday, you started in the middle of the action and then you went back to explain your setting. So this is a good option if you want to make your beginning super exciting and your reader is really wondering what's going on. And we saw some good examples of that yesterday. So for instance, for the Yellowstone example, we saw what it would look like if I started at the chronological beginning. When I was 10, we went to Yellowstone, etc. But this is what it might look like if I began with the most exciting point on my list, when I got lost in the woods. A blackberry vine caught my hair. I struggled to pull free, yanking at my hair with my scratched and bleeding arms. I was surrounded by dense green wall, trapped and encircled by thorns and vines. It wasn't quite how I'd imagined my Yellowstone vacation. In fact, when my dad first informed us of the trip, I'd imagined sitting around a fire at a comfortable campsite, roasting s'mores. Actually, that's pretty much what the first night was like. And then I could go on to explain how we got there. After we set up camp on the banks of a sparkling stream, my dad built a fire in the camp fireplace, and we lounged around in our comfortable camp chairs, telling stories and goofing off. When we got tired, we retired to the 2-room tent my dad had bought especially for the trip, and snuggled up in our fluffy sleeping bags. It wasn't until next morning that I got a real taste of the wild. It all started when, and then I'm kind of going back in a chronological order, but I start with this really active, really, basically struggling conflict here about being lost in the woods, trying to pull free of all these vines. When I start with something like that, I draw the reader in immediately, and then they're wondering, well, how did you get to that point? So you kind of go backwards, and you give your 1, 2, 3. So it is possible to do it out of chronological order, as a lot of you did yesterday, and that can possibly make it more exciting. So let's practice. Let's take a look at this example list of events, and I want you guys to show me where are some of the most exciting parts. So if we wanted to start the story at the most exciting part, what would be a good part to start the story at? So number 1 is my mom remodeled the kitchen. Then my mom cleaned the new kitchen and arranged everything perfectly to show it off to my grandma. I got hungry. My mom was busy, so I couldn't ask her if it was okay to make cookies. I decided to make cookies anyway. First I broke an egg on the floor, then I got batter all over the ceiling. Then I knocked over a bag of flour. My mom came in and saw the mess. She started yelling at me, the doorbell rang, and it was my grandma. So, and I saw a raised hand.
What do you think's the most? It started whenever she or he broke an egg.
Okay, so you think maybe the exciting point starts when the person breaks the egg on the floor. Okay, so I'm going to put a mark next to it. Any other ideas? What are some other exciting points in the story?
Hi.
Then I got batter all over the ceiling.
Okay, so this is also an exciting point right here, the getting batter all over the ceiling.
Then I knocked over a bag of flour.
Okay, the flour. And do you guys think at what point does the excitingness, that's not a word. Okay. At what point does it stop being so exciting? And at what point does it start? So we know it starts probably with the egg being broken on the floor. When does it end, or does it end? Do you think there's more exciting points? So Interesting. So you think the doorbell ringing would be the exciting point. So now if we look at this whole part here, probably any portion of it would be pretty exciting to start. Now there's parts that might be more exciting. So for instance, if we look at the Yellowstone example, it starts when there's this character who's trying to get through the blackberry vines and is stuck in the middle of the forest. So that's right from, let me try to find the list of the Yellowstone. Okay, sorry. So here's the Yellowstone one, and it starts right around here. I wandered in the woods, I believe. Or maybe it could have been, I'm thinking it's anywhere between here and here. I'm trying to remember at what point I decided to start it. I think it was after I realized I was lost, it was I wandered in the woods. So any point after the conflict really starts, then it's super exciting. Another part that might be exciting is when you get confronted by someone, for instance, if you're in trouble. So an interesting point to start, it might be when your mom came in and saw the mess, and we actually had an example a lot like that. So you could start with that, your mom shouting at you, or you could start with grandma ringing the doorbell. I looked around me at the giant mess, my mom's red face exerted from shouting at me, and batter all over the ceiling. And my mom and I looked at each other in dread or something as my grandma walked in. So now it's your turn. Look at your list of events and find what those exciting points are. What is the most exciting part of your story? So using your list of events as a guideline, choose a really exciting scene to put at the beginning of your story. Then backtrack and explain how you got there. So you might want to turn over your piece of paper if you need some room. So using your list of events as a guideline, choose a really exciting scene to put at the beginning of your story. Then backtrack to explain how you got there. So this, I want you to actually really, and you can take from what you wrote yesterday, I want you to actually really write the beginning of your personal narrative. So yesterday, you didn't go into you probably wrote like some of you wrote 3 sentences, some of you wrote a lot more, but I want you to actually write the beginning of your personal narrative, start at the most exciting point, backtrack to explain how you got there, and actually explain it quite a bit. So, start at one of these points and then go back over here. And try to get as far down as you can, so to write as much at the beginning as you can. And I'll give you a little bit of time for that. Okay, seeing some more raised hands. So let's get everyone who's done raise their hand quickly so I can see. Okay, so now we're time for that to share what you've written.
It was 1:15 when it happened. was racing my friends. I fell down and busted my elbow. It really, really hurt. She heard me crying. She came running to see if I was okay. She had something coming that she didn't want to see.
Okay, so now you actually give a little bit of explanation beforehand. So you explain that you were out biking with your friend. It might be and that's perfectly fine because actually it makes sense for the reader to see what happened. But if you wanted to start at a super exciting point, you might actually start it at the point where you fall off your bike or you injure yourself. You did fall off your bike, right?
Actually, it was my scooter.
Oh, your scooter. Okay, sorry. the bell thing. So you fell off your scooter and it was your elbow, right?
Right.
Okay, so you might actually start at the point where you injure your elbow and then backtrack, but it's perfectly fine the way you have it as well. Either way is fine. So now it's also a good idea to maybe give a little bit of detail about the area surrounding you, about the scooter even, so that we have a clearer idea of what everything looks like. So include a little bit more detail, but otherwise very good job. Thanks for sharing.
And
I went to look at the animals. An animal bit my pants. Oh no, I said with a terrible screech. I went to the gift shop to buy myself a new pair of pants. They did not have any pants, so I had to wear some baggy pants because they were my dad.
Okay, so now what is the main conflict in your personal narrative?
An animal bit my pants.
Animal bit your pants? Okay, wow, that would probably be. I'm sure that you probably are thinking back to that experience, and I'm glad that I'm hoping it won't happen again. So what you might want to do actually is, and I'm going to insert a page, is you could start with "youch" or something like that at the very beginning, and then you could explain an animal had, and I actually won't go and write out this, but you could start with saying like "youch," an animal had bit my pants, and then go on to explain, it had been just a couple minutes ago or an hour ago or something like that we had gone to the gift shop to buy baggy pants. So when you start with like an exclamation or something really exciting, then it sort of gets the reader's attention. Great job. So who else would like to share theirs?
Acing.
I was making myself some eggs when I tripped. I knocked over every food coloring we had in the house. The eggs looked nasty but still tasted the same. And then my piece of toast fell on the egg and cooked inside the egg.
A piece of what fell on an egg?
Toast.
Toast. Okay. So while it was cooking. Great. So what would you say? What is the most exciting point of your story? What is the conflict in your story?
That I messed up my lunch.
Okay.
My breakfast.
You messed up your breakfast. Great. So you decide to start at that point. Very good. Now, what you might want to do is use some descriptive. You were pretty descriptive, but you might want to add some more details about maybe you could hear the egg sizzling or something like that, just to give us more of and maybe describe, were you hungry, were you really looking forward to eating your breakfast or something, so that we can feel how disappointed you were, maybe that they didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. And that way we understand why it's more of a conflict, because otherwise I might think, well, it's not the end of the world, it's just some eggs that got messed up. But if you make it, if you share either how hungry you are, or maybe you were really looking forward to eating it, or you were just really disappointed, then we understand more of why it's important to you. Okay, who else would like to share theirs?
Ring at the phone rang at my mom's job. Hello, Taco Bell, how may I help you? She said. Hey Mom, where are you? I yelled into the phone. What do you want? She said. I want to get out of the smelly house and go to Lincoln Park. No, she yelled. Fine, I said. Be that way. I hung up the phone and got my life material and ran into the bathroom. I got in the tub with my pillow and went to sleep. 10 hours ago. Okay, stop crying. I promise you can go, she said.
Yay, I said. I packed my bag and walked to my babysitting house.
Okay. So I really like how you start with this conversation that you're having with your mom. That's and especially it's funny how you say, "How may I help you?" and then it's you wanting to go. So very nice job with the introduction there. Now, one thing that you might want to do though is that we as readers were really interested to find out more about your time in the tub. That's a pretty unusual experience there, I think. So tell us more about that. You know, we want to find out exactly what that's like because that's a really funny experience and you want to make the most of it. So really good job. Maybe add some more details and explain how you felt at these points because we understand that you're probably disappointed, but you might want to emphasize it more. You know, by showing, well, obviously you went to the tub, but then also you couldn't believe that your mom wasn't taking you or something like that. So very good job. Okay, let's get one more person to share.
Christopher, I don't want to. That was when we played one-on-one football in his own station after I had arrived to his house.
I'm sorry I didn't quite hear all that.
Be louder. Come on, close to the front first by the microphone.
I don't know because that was when we were playing one-on-one football in his open space room after I had arrived to his house.
Okay, I didn't hear the end of that. Could you say it again, like really loud? Sorry. Sorry, it's just, I think because you're off. Are you off in the corner or?
Yeah, that's all right. I'll read it. It says, I jumped on my cousin. That was when we were playing one-on-one football in his open space room after I had already arrived at his house.
Okay, so very good job on selecting the most exciting point. That is definitely a very exciting point when you jump on your cousin. But you really want to put the jump on your cousin into it by because right now when you're telling it, sort of like, well, I jumped